So we stopped working against each other every time that painful dynamic would pop up. And we started working together to solve problems together and avoid a lot of conflict. But we only got there because we didn't avoid the problem.
Right.
So we learned how to avoid the conflict by not avoiding the problem. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey, welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show. We are always excited to have you guys with us, and thank you so much for your feedback, your ongoing support, and encouragement. We're so grateful to be able to bring value to you, and we hope to continue to do that for many, many more weeks and months and years to come. And one of the things that really motivates us and that helps us is when you give us feedback. And so we would so appreciate if you'd be willing to hop into the app where you listen. And if it allows, like over on Apple Podcasts, give us a rating and a review. And just scroll down past all the episodes and you'll find where all those reviews are. And there's a little link right underneath that says write a review. Just click it and share what you think. We would really appreciate it. But enough of my ad voice. Let's get on with today's episode.
So today's episode is a continuation of last week's conversation where we exposed what we called back breakers.
Yes.
That can keep us stuck as a couple, feeling really overwhelmed around the work that we need to do to move beyond our issues and to truly thrive and enjoy our marriage.
Yeah.
And if you missed last week's episode, we encourage you to go back and listen to that. It's episode 101.
Do it right now.
Yeah, so that you can gain awareness around those backbreakers that might be going on in your dynamics, and so that you can identify where it is you'd like to focus.
That's right. Just on one, right?
That's right. We encourage you to just pick one of those 4 backbreakers because, we don't want you to get more overwhelmed than you already are.
Yeah, this is all about not getting overwhelmed, right?
Right. And we also share that we've experienced all 4 of these backbreakers, and we were able to eventually get out from under the backbreaking, overwhelming, impossible burden and move forward to get beyond those painful issues and dysfunction. And that's what we want for you too.
Absolutely. We're excited in this episode. Instead of focusing on backbreakers, we're going to focus on what we call load lifters that we discovered along the way.
Yep.
And we just want to share how they've helped us to move beyond feeling overwhelmed. That's really what we want for you. Relief from your backbreaker so that you can start working together to make some progress and get unstuck. And you can get there. And yes, you're going to need to do some work.
Sure.
That's just the reality of marriage if you want to experience healthy connection and be successful. But the work doesn't have to break your back.
No.
So today's all about those load lifters, getting out from under the backbreakers that are making things harder than they really need to be.
Yeah, sometimes they can really make things more challenging.
Yeah.
So hopefully you've taken a little bit of time to process and identify the backbreaker that's creating the biggest challenge in moving forward for you and keeping you from doing the work that needs to be done in your marriage.
Right.
And maybe you're feeling like this will be impossible. That's okay. We've been there.
Sure.
But what we want to talk about are the load lifters around each 4 of these backbreakers that we've explored. And it's our hope that you'll be able to identify a next step in your journey, a positive new action that will help you get out from under your backbreaker, like we said. So let's dive in and explore some load lifters.
Yeah, and when I think about a load lifter, I get this image of someone landscaping a property. They've got piles and piles of dirt and big rocks. They need to move them around. So they bring in a big backhoe.
Or some kind of machinery.
Yeah, to get the job done efficiently. Now, if they had to do it all by hand, it might take weeks, maybe even months, and probably a whole bunch of people. But with the help of the right tools or load lifters, they can get it done in the matter of a day or a few days. But the reality is that even the person operating the backhoe is working. He's had to go through some training, so he knows what he's doing. Otherwise, if you put someone that's got no skills behind the controls of a backhoe, that can actually create a lot of damage. In fact, put me behind one and I could probably do that, right?
Yeah.
So there is work involved in learning how to operate the machinery or how to gain those skills. And you know, when you're using a backhoe, just because you've got the machinery, you're still doing some work.
Right.
It's not all just sunshine and roses, right? You got to show up at the job site. You got to put in the time that it takes to finish the job. And sometimes it takes a while. You have to stay focused. You're not just along for the ride, daydreaming as you're moving this big machinery around the landscaping. It takes concentration. It takes some skill.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about load lifters, we're really talking about something that's going to help you get the work done with skill and efficiency. But we're not talking about a quick fix or a silver bullet that's just going to magically solve all your issues, because that doesn't actually exist.
Nope.
And if you're hoping for that silver bullet that saves you from having to put in the work, you're probably looking in the wrong place.
Yeah, it just isn't there. And, you know, this is something we had to learn as we work through all of our stuff. It's going to take work, but the work doesn't have to be backbreaking. Mm-hmm. So today's load lifters are action steps to help you get out from under the backbreakers. They aren't quick or easy, but they are the path to real progress.
Right.
So let's start with one of the backbreakers that plagued us for years.
Oh, I thought all four of them did.
Well, they did. But this particular one is all about not having the right tools for the job. And the reason we want to start here is because the right tools can dramatically influence the other three backbreakers as well.
Yeah.
Now, last week we asked you the question, do you have the right tools you need to solve your problems and move forward? And maybe you've been contemplating that this week.
Yeah, maybe that's the one that you chose. You know, we recently coached a couple who described their issues and problems and painful frustration.
Yeah.
And then they shared all the ways that they've been trying to fix things. Finally, the husband said to us, we've been working really hard, but not very smart. You know what? That's really common. We spent years working hard, but not very smart. Sometimes we have this mindset that we should just be able to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
So we work and we work and we work at it, but we don't seem to make any progress, and things sometimes even backslide. They start to go downhill.
Yeah.
And often this is because we simply don't have the right tools, or we're not using the right tool for this specific job.
Right.
And that means we're not working in a very smart or very efficient way. Honey, I wonder, like in the beginning of our relationship, would you have described yourself as a good communicator?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And here's one for you, honey. Would you have described yourself as having the skills needed to resolve conflict well and to problem solve?
Well, of course I would. I mean, I still do, right? How about managing emotions? You know, if you think way back, how would you have rated yourself if I had said, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you at managing your emotions? We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So Scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
I probably would have thought I was about a 7 or an 8. What about you? How would you have rated yourself on managing emotions?
20 years ago, I would have said a 10, of course.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
because I have a lot of confidence in myself. So, when it came to parenting skills, how do you think you would have described yourself 20 years ago?
Well, my parenting decisions were driven by guilt back then, although I probably wasn't fully aware of that fact.
Yeah.
And even though I was permissive, I believe that I did have some parental authority and that I could use it when and if I needed to, which of course, looking back, was very rare.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought I had some decent parenting skills back then.
Mm-hmm. And I personally thought I knew everything about parenting, even though I didn't have any kids of my own yet.
You did.
But I really believed I could figure it out.
Uh-huh.
It seems like many of us tend to have blind spots around our level of skill in lots of areas of marriage and family life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it isn't surprising when we run into some problems.
Right.
We think we have, or at least we should have, the tools and the skills we need. But when the rubber meets the road and we hit a little bit of a bump, the reality is that most of us struggle.
Yeah.
We're not as prepared for those things as we think we are.
Yeah, we certainly struggled. And these areas that we just mentioned, communication, conflict resolution, managing our emotions, and parenting, these are the ones that often create the biggest challenges, especially for blended family couples.
Sure.
And really, there's 2 reasons why we believe this is true. First, because of the multiple opportunities for pain and confusion and misunderstandings, right? We wouldn't need to have a podcast and talk about all these issues if there wasn't so much pain involved in blending families, right, honey?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's a minefield, and we're continually hitting bombshells that cause these unexpected explosions and painful realities for us. And, I thought that I possessed all these great skills in the beginning, but what I didn't realize is that my skill levels would be tested and pushed way beyond my current abilities.
Yeah.
This stuff is really hard, and we both experience a lot of painful challenges regularly.
Yeah. And, I think that a lot of us in blended families get challenged by this kind of thing because we've been through some stuff already. We've maybe been through a separation or divorce. We've maybe lost someone, a loved one, and we've been through some pain. And I know that matures us and it changes us, but that doesn't always mean it fully equips us for the challenges to come.
Right.
And so sometimes we're a little misguided in exactly how equipped we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the second reason why this can be so challenging is because most of us didn't have good examples of these skills, right? And so we didn't really receive any kind of intentional training, which really means that we're just kind of winging it and drawing on past experiences in life, which maybe didn't offer us that in-depth experience or training that we now need.
Yeah, and in fact, many of us instead were actually exposed to some not so great examples. I've shared plenty of times on the podcast of how I grew up in a really challenging blended family dynamic. My parents often resorted to power and control when conflict came up, and they didn't really solve problems or learn ways to communicate effectively. My stepmom took over. My dad would often concede, and it was a real challenge. And what's interesting is I came out of that and I started heading into our marriage thinking, well, I know everything not to do.
Right.
But I've since discovered that knowing what not to do and knowing what to do are 2 very different things.
Very different. Yeah, because you don't have that skill.
Sure.
And, my example growing up of emotional management was basically shut down and avoid it all.
Yeah, it'll go away, right?
We never really talked about emotions in my family growing up. And, honey, neither of us had ever been exposed to a healthy, authoritative parent that was both loving and firm, except maybe on a TV show, right?
Well, I don't know if that would be a fair example. Yeah, most TV characters have some flaws.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly portrayed realistically,
Right.
but I never had that example.
Yeah. So the thing is, we come in with some blind spots around our own capacity to deal with all of these things. And hopefully we start to realize that this is maybe going to be a bit harder than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
But that actually then can get us stuck to
Yeah,
think,
because
well,
what do we
now
do
what,
then? Yeah.
Right? Well, we usually see couples either struggle for years and just try to figure it out on their own, and they tend to kind of white knuckle through it, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they usually end up experiencing a lot of damage in their relationship.
Yeah.
Not only in their couple relationship, but even in their relationship with their kids and with their stepkids as well.
Right.
And they experience distance. But we also see couples who've become aware that they need some help with skill building and that it's time for kind of an upgrade. Kind of like last week, I talked about my upgrade in my yard tools that are working so much better for me now.
Yeah.
And they've realized that they need some additional tools that are necessary if they want to handle their challenges successfully and avoid that relational damage that could come.
Right.
What a great realization, because that can help lift the load, avoid some backbreaking dilemmas, and when they get equipped early with the right tools for the job, they can get done what needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So much more effective and efficient, right?
That's right.
So if this was the one backbreaker that you most identified with last week, feeling like you're lacking in the tools and the skills that you need, then we want to encourage you to take one step toward stocking your tool belt, right? Now, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this, but you may want to spend a little time to consider where you need the most help at this point in your journey. What is your major pain point? And where's the priority? If it's around parenting and you're struggling to partner and get on the same page, there are so many awesome parenting tools out there that can help you.
Sure.
And a great place to start is our own course. It's called Step Families That Make It. And it's really about coming together as a couple around how you want to lead your family and how you make some united decisions around the character traits, the life skills, and the values you want to instill in your home.
Yep.
And how you're going to get on the same page as you implement these things. It's really about creating a code of conduct for everyone to live by. So if you're interested in taking advantage of that tool that focuses on becoming effective parenting partners, we'll go ahead and put a link in the show notes to that online course.
Yeah, you can check it out. And maybe you think about this load lifter of getting the right tools for the job, and you decide you could use some updated tools around managing emotions, effective communication, conflict resolution, or even problem solving. There's a ton of resources out there. There's books and podcasts and classes and coaching, all kinds of different ways for you to engage in some new learning that can develop these practical tools and really lift the load and help you to get out from under this backbreaker.
Right.
Often we just don't know what we don't know. So we want to get out there and find the tools and realize, oh, there's something to help us get past this.
Yeah, it can make a huge difference. And, we struggled with this backbreaker for years until we began to pick up some solid, effective tools to help us improve in all of these areas that we just talked about. And, honey, I think you'd probably agree with me that the best tool we discovered in our marriage was the Relate Strong program.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's just so simple and it's a practical tool that you can use around all of those things. We found it to be incredibly beneficial in managing emotions so that we can show up well in tough conversations. And this is instrumental in helping us to resolve conflict and do some really in-depth problem solving. So we found this one tool to be so impactful that it's where we start with all of our coaching clients. Because if we aren't able to control our emotions and find ways to hear each other and process through our issues, we certainly won't have the capacity to solve problems around our blended family challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one that anyone can learn.
It is.
And we keep finding that it's making a huge difference in how we work through our own conflict and make decisions, but also for others that we get to help invest in
Absolutely.
this. If you want to learn more about that, we'll put a link in the show notes, but we encourage you just to take a next step. Find the tools that you need, the people that you need to connect with, and really engage in learning and practicing your updated tools. If you don't practice it, if you don't put it into place, it's not going to do anything for you. But that's going to help you get into this load lifter of developing better skills, even around the challenging areas that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about the backbreaker of avoidance and painful cycles. And if there's one mind-blowing thing I've learned throughout our journey, honey, it's this. Avoidance doesn't solve problems.
Wow, that is mind-blowing, especially for a classic avoider.
I know. And in fact, avoidance almost always makes the problem worse.
Yeah, sure.
And last week, we asked you to consider if you're avoiding painful issues and reacting with repetitive cycles of conflict. This is such a big backbreaker.
Yep.
And for years, I had this very strong tendency to avoid our issues.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I thought that, you know, by avoiding tough conversations, we'd be avoiding conflict, and conflict was bad. And that kind of made sense to me back then because our conflict really was bad and sometimes even volatile.
Well, when we didn't know how to do it.
Right.
Well, yeah, sure.
So why would I want to go there when it's just so much easier to avoid everything, right?
In the moment. That's right.
But eventually that mindset started breaking down because of the repetitive cycles that we'd find ourselves in. There was a problem. We'd avoid the problem. The problem didn't go away, and gradually it got worse, which created painful feelings for both of us, right? There was resentment, there was anger, there was guilt, all kinds of things. And we'd be walking around on eggshells trying to ignore this big looming problem and all those pent-up emotions.
Yep.
Until one of us would just lose it, right?
Usually me.
Usually you, but sometimes me. And then we'd start blaming and attacking each other. And then we'd start defending ourselves. And really any communication just broke down.
Right.
And we'd get stuck in a painful cycle that was really dysfunctional and very hurtful. And it could last for days, each of us kind of stubbornly opposing each other.
Yep.
And that would lead to more difficult emotions. We'd start to feel unheard or abandoned or isolated or rejected or misunderstood. The list goes on and on and on, right? I mean, it's just crazy, this cycle we'd fall into. And sometimes it would take a long time for us to work through it, to apologize for any of the hurtful things that we said and did, and for us to recover from all of the damage. And often that original problem still was unresolved, right? It was still there. And so, of course, the cycle would start again when the problem resurfaced, which it always would, and we would avoid it because we didn't want to engage in conflict and so on. Same old issue, same old reaction, same old argument, same old pain. And this really is that cycle of insanity, doing the same things over and over, but somehow expecting a different result for some reason.
Yeah, we definitely were stuck in that for years. So the load lifter on this is to avoid avoidance. You've got to face your problems head on. Now, I know that sounds really simple, but this is easier said than done because it does take work to work through the problems and to get to the other side of them with a solid plan and a real resolution rather than just staying stuck in that endless cycle. You've got to be equipped to face your challenges. And for blended family couples, knowledge is a powerful way to equip yourself.
Absolutely. Probably the strongest catalyst of our painful cycle, and the one that we avoided for years, was that dynamic of the stranded stranger and the trapped teammate.
Yeah.
I felt so helpless and hopeless. And honey, you felt isolated, right?
Yeah,
unappreciated.
Yeah, for sure.
But we couldn't understand each other's perspective and pain, or even understand our own intense emotions around these dynamics because we didn't even know about this dynamic, the stranded stranger and the trapped teammate. We just kind of fell into it. But when we finally gained some knowledge around this dynamic, it was just a game changer for us.
Yeah.
Because now we were equipped with understanding and insight that we so desperately needed.
Yeah, it gave us a language to put around it. It helped us not only to understand what we were individually going through, but actually to be able to communicate it to each other so that we could share in the experience and have a little bit more understanding for each other.
Yeah.
And I love it when we get to share about the trapped teammate and stranded stranger with other couples because they go, oh my gosh, like it's a thing. Like there's a name for it, which also means there must be a way through it.
Exactly.
Right? And not only that, but we've been able to learn how to approach the dynamic and strategize together around how we could minimize it so that we could have productive conversations that, would help bring healing in our own marriage and finally stop that endless cycle of avoidance. So we stopped working against each other every time that painful dynamic would pop up. And we started working together to just call it out, solve problems together, and avoid a lot of conflict. But we only got there because we didn't avoid the problem.
Right.
So we learned how to avoid the conflict by not avoiding the problem.
We learned to work through the conflict well.
Sure.
But avoiding it didn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you identified avoidance and painful cycles as your backbreaker, we encourage you to take one step towards gaining the knowledge and insight you need to work through your problems and strategize as a team how you'll approach them differently.
Right.
And then you can avoid getting sucked back into that same old dysfunctional cycle. The definition of sanity in this scenario is choosing to do something different so that you get something better.
That's
right? You don't have to stay stuck. Choose one way to gain empowerment through knowledge, and then you can avoid avoidance.
That's right.
So important. All right, let's talk about deep-rooted issues that are below the surface and that really tend to negatively impact our marriage because this can be a huge backbreaker. And the question we asked around this one is, are you mostly focused on the surface of the problem and leaving the core issues untouched?
Yeah, we struggled with this one for a long time because we both came into marriage with a history.
Yeah.
And both of our histories had a lot of pain in it.
Absolutely.
I came out of my family of origin with some deep abandonment issues, and it was really easy for you to unknowingly trip over the tripwires of those things that were going on under the surface, deep down underneath. And when I had no awareness of what was going on at the root of my experiences and the baggage, so to speak, that I brought into our marriage, it was really easy for me to just blame you.
Right.
Because what it felt like is you were causing pain. But what I've learned over the years is that the pain was actually caused by the root of that history, not by the surface level weeds that were in our garden that seemed to be tripping me up.
And of course, I came in with my own family of origin issues that caused me to feel pretty insecure and inadequate that you would trip over. And on top of that, I had been married twice before, and I sustained some deep wounds. And that created some trust issues for me. So even though I thought I'd healed from these things because I had done some counseling, whenever challenges would come up between you and I, honey, that even vaguely reminded me of painful things from my past, I would just automatically react defensively, or I would try to protect myself, or I'd shut down. And we spent years hacking away at the surface of our marriage and family issues, thinking that that was enough, right? I mean, we read books, we led support groups, we attended retreats and workshops, which were all really great things. But there were still underlying wounds that weren't being addressed. And those wounds, mine and yours, honey, they would rub and grind up against each other. And they would lead to a whole new level of painful issues that weighed us down, and they were breaking our backs.
Yeah, it was really tough on both of us. And maybe this week you've been thinking about this particular backbreaker, the one we talked about, the weeds and pulling them up by their roots.
Yeah.
Maybe there's deeper issues from the past around guilt or fear or unforgiveness or betrayal. Those are all things many of us have experienced. Yeah. Really anything that seems to hold you back from truly thriving and connecting as a couple, then that might be an area you need to explore and get some help to uproot whatever might be going on under the surface.
But what we discovered that in order to do this in our marriage and around our individual issues was that we each needed to be willing to take ownership of our part and then take action to build a trusted support network to help us work through and heal at a deeper level than all those surface level symptoms. Right? I mean, we knew we needed to reach out for help on these things because obviously, if we could have done it on our own, we would have already done it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We'd each been carrying around this baggage for years. So we needed some help.
And this isn't a one size fits all, but this is basically the load lifter. And that is creating a network of support that's genuinely going to help you work through the root of the issue.
And to find healing.
And really, a lot of this we've found for ourselves, and we've even found with other couples, that a lot of this is individual work. It's not necessarily couple work because the pains we experience as individuals are different for most of us anyway.
And we don't always understand each other's pains. I didn't get your abandonment issues and you didn't get mine because we didn't experience those same things.
Absolutely. So working individually with a counselor it brought incredible value for us. And the thing that we discovered is it really wasn't as much work as we originally thought it was going to be.
No.
Right? We talked about that a bit last week. We had this idea, this overwhelming, looming view of what we thought it was going to take to bring healing for our marriage. But it wasn't years. It was months.
Right.
It took work, just like that, worker in the backhoe has to do some work and some skill building. But it wasn't nearly as difficult as we thought it was going to be. There were painful moments. We had to be fully engaged if we wanted to really make progress. But it was so worth making the progress to get under the surface and uproot some of those things so that we didn't have to deal with them. And the great part was, I've discovered for me, I don't have to deal with those pains and that struggle within our context of our marriage anymore, but I also don't have to deal with that stuff in the context of other relationships.
Yeah.
Like when I've had some painful times with Annika along the way, or when I've had some painful time with friends or coworkers at work and all of that stuff. I was like, wow, this helped me for my whole life, not just within the context of my marriage.
Healthier person overall.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, for us, counseling really helped. But one thing that really also helped me was finding a mentor. And in fact, I think I've shared here before that I've had 2 mentors over the years that have really invested in me. But I want to talk a little bit about this load lifter of getting this support network. Sometimes when somebody says, oh, you really need to get, support and have a support network, one of the first places we can think is, oh, our friends, right? We think about those people who are going to confirm for us that we're right.
Our cheerleaders.
Exactly. And often even our well-meaning friends can do a little bit more harm than good because they just want you in the moment to reduce your pain.
Right.
And so sometimes they're not willing to fully tell you the truth.
Or challenge your thought process.
Sometimes they're not equipped to challenge your thought process. And so way back when I said, okay, I got to get a support network. Yes, I'm going to go get into counseling. I also need some people to help me understand what it's like to be a good dad, what it's like to be a good husband, how to have health in these type of relationships. And I look back and I went, oh, crud. I have not had a very good example. Hey, I love my dad, but he and I have had plenty of conversations. But growing up, I just didn't have that great of an example. And so I had to look for those trusted people who would challenge me and also who had what I wanted. And I found 2 individuals, 2 men who had the kind of marriage I want and the kind of adult kids that I wanted my kids to be like someday. And I just said, hey guys, can you spend some time with me?
Mm-hmm.
But what I had to also do is I had to onboard a lot of what they said to me, but I had to kind of hold at bay what some of my friends had to say, because my friends, again, as well-meaning as they were,
they're not as
sometimes
objective.
gave me some really terrible advice.
Yeah.
And so when we're working through this piece of trying to uproot what's going on in our heart, we need to be very aware of who's in our support network and how we're going about building that. Don't just grab a bunch of people that you like who are going to confirm your biases.
Right.
You want somebody who's going to actually challenge your biases and help you to grow.
Right. A trusted person.
That's right.
And another thing that can help are specifically focused support groups. But just make sure that you feel safe to share what's really going on for you and that the group is going below the surface and really helping you to uproot deeper issues.
Sure.
If you're meeting with a support group that's talking about, recipes and weather, and that's not going to be helpful.
Well, unless your deep problem is cooking.
Yeah. But again, you want to push yourself to go to a deeper level and find a way to process through those emotions, either with a coach or a counselor or a mentor, or even by journaling. That can be really helpful. But finding an appropriate life coach might also be a great step. Someone who has some understanding around your specific issue and is willing to challenge you a bit, like you said, honey. But make sure you choose to move forward to uproot those weeds from your garden. But you've got to be diligent and you've got to be committed to the process. Don't give up just because it's painful.
That's right.
The process of releasing and recovering from painful experiences always requires us to feel the pain and work through it.
Yeah.
So go in expecting that you'll need to kind of reopen the wound in order to heal. But it'll be worth it when you're out from under that backbreaker of deep underlying issues. And this is something we experienced, and it's been amazing to get out from under those. So powerful and beneficial for us, not only as individuals, like Mike was saying, in all kinds of areas of our life, but also for our marriage.
Yeah. All right, let's jump to the final backbreaker we talked about last week, which is this whole idea about the motivation of our partner and how that impacts our willingness to invest in doing the work that it's going to take to get back on track.
Right.
Last week, we challenged you to consider if you've fallen into a state of hopelessness because you believe your spouse is unmotivated to put in the work.
Right.
That can be really challenging. It can feel like there's just no way past these issues if we feel like that other person is either incapable or unwilling of doing the work that it's going to take to get back on track. And often we find ourselves simply blaming the other person.
Right.
We're really focused on what they're doing and a little less focused on what we're doing.
Yes.
And the load lifter to counteract this particular backbreaker is this. Stop believing the lie that change can't happen unless your partner changes.
Yeah.
If you want to see something different, then you've got to go get after it, regardless of what your partner chooses to do. I remember that place where I felt so hopeless, overwhelmed, and felt like it was impossible for us to make any change in our marriage.
Right.
And you know what? If I was really honest in some of those moments, I just simply blamed that on you.
Right.
I thought, well, shoot, if you're not willing to change, then all hope is lost. And I had some clues that you might not be willing to change.
Sure.
But I didn't really know what was going on inside for you. What I did know was what was happening for me. And I had to start getting out of this mindset that in order for us to find healing, that I had to follow. I had to be a follower and to wait until you were going to take the first step. And I had to hit that point of just really challenging my own thought process and say, wait a second. Well, what if this time it's time for you to follow?
Yeah.
Maybe I need to take the lead.
Yeah.
And what would it look like for me to step out and say, you know what? I'm going to do something different regardless of what you decide to do.
Yeah.
And so I think I shared a little bit last week that at some point, I remember coming to you and saying, look, this is hard. We're really struggling right now. And I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to go get some help. And I got convicted. I remember being pretty straightforward that, hey, I'm going to go get some help, and it's up to you what you're going to do.
Right.
I decided that I was no longer going to allow my own progress to be hijacked by your decisions.
Right.
And so I went and started getting some help. And what we discovered over time is that really was a big catalyst to us finding healing and doing something new.
Yeah. Yeah, because even though I wasn't in a place of wanting to engage or invest at that point, you taking that step spoke volumes to me, especially when you started showing up differently.
Right.
I could tell that, wow, whatever work he's doing with that counselor, it's making a difference.
Sure.
He's not as angry. He's handling things differently. He's calmer. I mean, that was like, wow. There's change happening in him. And then that kind of sparked hope in me.
Yeah. You know, it took a little while for that to happen. So I wonder
you had to be
if
patient.
you could really get back in the recesses of your memory and think about before I started showing up differently, but that moment or that day or that season where I just came and said, look, I'm going to go get some help, but things didn't quite change yet. What were you thinking then?
I'll believe it when I see it.
I knew you were going to say that. I don't think we've ever put it in those terms, but I had a feeling you were going to say something like that.
I still felt like things were impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where I was. I was really stuck.
Yeah. And, you know, I think what's so interesting is we've shared this story in multiple venues in multiple ways before. And there have been times where one partner will say, and actually I think I've heard it more from wives directly to you, saying, oh, well, you have Mike as a husband and he's done this, but my husband won't do this.
My husband isn't Mike. He's not intentional. He's not this. He's not that like Mike is. And it makes me chuckle.
Well, let me tell you, underneath, I am an imperfect jerk sometimes. Nobody needs to put me up on a pedestal. But the truth is that right there, that's the backbreaking assumption.
Yeah.
That, oh, well, if my partner's not going to change, then I don't need to change.
Yeah.
And all of us have to get out of that mindset.
And not only is it a lie that you're believing, but it's an excuse.
Exactly.
It really is an excuse of, well, I don't have to do anything because they're not doing anything. So we're just going to stay stuck.
Yeah.
And I've heard people say, well, what if I step up and put forth all this work and go to a counselor and work on my issues and make changes and nothing happens? There's still no change.
Yeah.
And to that, I say, well, think about it from the other side. What if you do nothing?
Right.
And things continue to get worse.
Yeah.
And your marriage crumbles and you lose.
Yeah. You lose.
And it's over.
Right.
How are you going to think about that? Are you going to think back and say, I did everything I could to save that relationship?
Yep.
Even when my partner wasn't motivated, I still did everything I could. Or are you going to look back with regret and go, I didn't really give it everything I had.
Yeah, maybe I should have tried a little harder.
I had a lot of excuses is what I had.
Yeah.
And so you got to think beyond today.
Right.
And really look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, this is really just all about changing your mindset. I know I blamed you for so much, and I wanted to sit in that and just make excuses and point the fingers. But eventually, I just had to realize, look, I got to take responsibility for myself. And you talked earlier about when we change that attitude and then we go do the work. What if?
Yeah. What if nothing changes?
Yeah, there's a risk.
There is.
But the truth is, if you go and do that work, you bring some healing and start to uproot some of those roots of the weeds. If you stop avoiding the issues for yourself and you go do what you need to do.
To face them.
And you really face the challenges. And you go and find some of those tools that are going to help you show up better regardless of what your partner does. Even if the worst happens, you are now better equipped for every other relationship in your life.
Absolutely.
So no matter what happens, you can't lose. And I just know this from my personal experience.
Yeah.
So don't fall victim to this back-breaking belief that you can't do anything if your partner doesn't get motivated.
Yeah.
You can go and make a difference.
Absolutely. You
So
can.
there we go. That's the pep talk, the load lifter for the day. Maybe we got in your face a little bit, but maybe you needed to be challenged.
It's only because we want good things for you.
Absolutely. So those are our 4 load lifters. Making sure we have the right tools.
Right.
Ensuring that we're not avoiding things. We've got to face them head on. Making sure that we're actually getting below the surface to the deeper level so that we can uproot those weeds. And then finally, making sure our mindset doesn't get hijacked by this belief that we can't do anything if our partner doesn't do something. If you can just take one of those and get started, you can actually make a big difference in your marriage and in your family.
Yeah.
So we want to encourage you to do that.
One action step forward. That's all it takes to start the momentum. It's not as hard as you think it's going to be.
That's right. So this week, choose one. And take a next step in it. Maybe you're going to click one of those links and reach out for a free consult call with us. Maybe you're going to have a simple discussion with your spouse and say, hey, what can we do together to take a next step? Whatever it is, take a next step in the one area where you feel most convicted in right now in this moment.
Get out from under that backbreaker.
Absolutely.
You can do it.
That's right. Okay, we hope this has brought you value and that you've been inspired by these last couple of episodes. We're just going to go ahead and end the conversation there, and we're going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.